going to shift straight into the LA Kings postseason awards.
Let's do it.
And we are honored to be able to announce them here on All the Kingsmen Live. So we're going to start off with Andrei Kopitar because he has collected 3 awards. We're going to go through them right now. First up, the Bill Libby MVP Award. This is voted on by the media. Carrlyn, you and I both voted on this.
Yes.
It is given annually to the Kings player who is the team's most valuable player as determined by the local media. It is named for Bill Libby, a former LA sports writer who died in 1984. I mean, Andrei Kopitar is the MVP. I don't think that's disputable, right?
It was an easy write-in for me. It wasn't no. I have no words. I literally was just like, it was like my brain was on autopilot. I was like, yep, Andrei Kopitar makes sense. Yep.
I don't know that it was unanimous, but I'm going to have to go ahead and assume that it was. And part of the reason is because the second award he's collecting is that he was the leading scorer with 62 points, 21 goals, and 41 assists in 70 games. He was also the Ace Bailey Memorial Award player. Now, that is voted on by the players.
Yep.
But again, not much of a surprise there, right?
Not really. And it's given to Kings players who are the most inspirational as determined by their team. So that's great that they're awarding that to their captain, who, of course, should be inspiration to them day in and day out.
The season that they missed the playoffs, Jonathan Quick missed 60 games. Andrei Kopitar hurt himself, but still put in the bulk of a season. To me, that season defines him more than the Stanley Cup wins or, being the team's leading scorer almost every year. The guy obviously comes out and gives it his all every season. Moving on, we go to the Daryl Evans Youth Hockey Service Award winner. Now, this goes to Trevor Lewis, and it is determined by the Kings Hockey Development Department and given annually to the Kings player who, quote, determined to continue the club's efforts in growing the game of hockey in our area. This is the only award for Trevor Lewis, so people who have followed the Kings Awards every season know what that means down the road for a different award. But we love Trevor Lewis, right?
We do. And not just his on ice stuff that he's able to do with youth hockey. I mean, just off the ice. I was at a library visit with him last year and him reading, B is for Bailey to all the kids there. That's still youth hockey development. It's just outside of an ice arena. And Trevor loves it. He's got 2 kids of his own. And I think that's a very deserving award for him.
Yeah, and was involved even this week in some off-ice stuff, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, next up is the most popular player. This one sort of caught me a little bit off guard, and it goes to Blake Lizotte. Now, the most popular player award is given annually by the Kings Booster Club to the most popular Kings player. So fans, if you're wondering how you can have a say in these awards, join the Kings Booster Club. Carrlyn, Blake Lizotte for most popular player. I'm assuming this is because of his, first of all, his personality, but also just the fact that he never takes even a second of a shift off.
He doesn't even take a second to breathe, sneeze, yawn, blink. He's just, Nelly was talking about him and how kind of, I don't know, we called him a pest all season long, right? And I agree with the popularity that he is being awarded here for the most popular player. I think fans all over Twitter were all over him as well. There were battles on what his nickname should be. He came in and made a splash on this team, not just on the ice, but again, off the ice. And I don't know. I totally agree with that right there. Most popular player for sure.
There were nights where I legitimately felt like he might have been the best player on the ice for the team. And on All the Kings Men, the audio version, the podcast version, we frequently say happiness is measured by expectation. And Blake Lizotte is one of those people who set high expectations and then never let you down.
Met them every time. Every single time.
Like Nelson said, he came in and stole a roster spot. I certainly did not expect him to be on this team, and he was great all season. So moving on, we've got 3 more names to mention, but a bunch of awards to give out. We're going to just start with Matt Roy because he collected this year. Starting out with the Mark Bavis Memorial Award for Best Newcomer. This is also voted on by the media and is given annually to the member of the Kings organization that makes the greatest impact as a newcomer. It is named, of course, for former Kings scout Mark Bavis, who tragically passed away in the 9/11 attacks. But Best Newcomer, it could have been Blake Lizotte. It could have been Cal Peterson. It could have been a bunch of players. But I went with Matt Roy for this one. I'm assuming you did as well, Carrlyn?
The other 2.
Oh, okay.
I believe I went with Blake Lizotte for this one. And then I think I gave Matt Roy the other 2 that you're about to mention.
All right. So the next one is, of course, Outstanding Defenseman. Now, Drew Doughty and Rob Blake have tied for winning this award 6 times each. But I, again, voted for Matt Roy, and I'm going to go ahead and just quickly dip my toe into the fancy stat pool.
Dip
And
it. Let's go. Fancy stat. Come on.
apologize. Right off the top, though, of course, he has a plus 16. Now, that's not a fancy stat. That's a stat that a lot of people malign. But in this house, we respect plus minus. And he had a plus 16. The next highest plus minus on the team was Anze Kopitar with 6. So, I mean, that just goes to show you that. Now, Corsi 4, and I understand a lot of people get uncomfortable when we talk about Corsi, but
just break it down in layman's terms, because I feel like people get uncomfortable when you just say the word, but they don't know what the stat is referring to.
It's just shots on goal. It's just how many times your team attempts a shot on goal versus how many times the other team attempts a shot on goal against your team. And amongst defensemen, he led the team with 56.1. The only players who had a higher rating with a considerable amount of games was Blake Lizotte, 56.5, and Tyler Toffoli at 57.6. And again, all that means is that when Matt Roy is on the ice, the Kings are directing offense towards the opponent 56% of the time. And again, highest rating on the Kings for that. Combine that with the fact that he, was called Steady Eddie, I believe, by Mike Crawford, and just really became one of the most reliable defensemen on the team. In a season where they didn't do fantastically in the standings. That was why I went ahead and gave that vote. Next award is the Defensive Player Award, which is only different from the Outstanding Defenseman because other players who are eligible are goalies and forwards. It is given annually to the Kings player, regardless of position, who most excels on the defensive end of the ice, as determined by the local media. Carrlyn, who did you vote for this award?
Defensive player, Matt Roy. So okay. I going back to not even a fancy stat here. Let's just go back to him at the beginning of the season. He didn't start off the way that he ended, Jesse. And there was a podcast that he did for NHL Network when we were over there in New York, and I got to follow them around the NHL studios. It was him and Sean Walker. He opened up about how him and Todd McClellan had a chat at the beginning of the season that kind of corrected the course he led for the rest of the year. And I feel like these awards are coming from him taking such good constructive criticism from a new coach and wanting to put his best foot forward. And it's just impressive to see where he ended up at the end of the year. And I feel like all of these are so deserved, but it didn't just happen magically. Like Blake Lizotte, it's great. He came in with a splash. He was so consistent the whole time. He never, he never wavered. Matt Roy didn't start off the season like that, but turned it around when he was told and constructed. And I think that that's just even more impressive that he ended off like this and was awarded all these awards. So,
yeah, and if you're a fan and you're wondering whether or not we're just playing favorites in the quote unquote media, Matt Roy also won the Unsung Hero Award. Or as we're calling it, the Trevor Lewis Award. And that is given annually to the Kings player who contributed the most to the team without receiving proper recognition for his contribution as determined by Kings players. So
here's these proper recognitions right here too. So
that's right. Well, I guess he can't win it next year. It'll go back to Trevor Lewis if Trevor Lewis comes back. But Trevor Lewis again has won the award 7 times, but that is going to round it out for Matt Roy. I skipped one. I apologize to Austin Wagner, winning the Jim Fox Community Service Award, determined by the Kings Care Foundation and given annually to the Kings player who best exemplifies strong community outreach by actively working with local youth organizations and community groups to increase awareness and raise funds to support the Kings community signature initiatives, education, health-related causes, and recreation. So congratulations to Austin Wagner, and thanks to him for all the work he does in order to win the Jim Fox Community Service Award.
Great for him. He's great with the kids. That's a no-brainer right there for me.
Now, finally, 2 awards that I had not even thought about when we got our ballots. And first up, Player of the Year. Now, behind the scenes a little bit, everybody was getting a bit frustrated because Alex Iafallo kept winning Player of the Month, and of course, he is the Player of the Year.
For good reason too, Jesse.
Yeah. No,
reason.
Well, I think he is sort of, I think the ceiling for what people can expect out of Blake Lizotte, right? It's a similar story, comes in, steals a spot. There was, some question as to whether or not he'd make the roster, and he winds up on the top line with Kopitar and Brown and, hasn't given that spot up. And obviously we're looking at his hat trick game against the Coyotes this season, but great guy, great player. And, it's moves like that I think stabilize this roster and make it possible for the Kings to put on a product that fans would want to watch and be excited for, even if they're not making the playoffs every season.
I'm just staring at this compilation.
Yeah.
I was trying to listen to what you were saying, and the GIFs and the different videos were so good. I hadn't seen half of that. I was like, wait, what's this one? What's that one?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But no, another consistent player, like you said, didn't give up his spot on the top line, has held it now for what, two like full seasons now, like does not budge unless, a little bit of a shuffle happens every odd game or so. But like, you can count on him. You really can count on him. And I don't think he's hit his ceiling yet either, which is exciting to think about if you really think about it like that. I don't think we've seen the best of Alex Iafallo. Like, I think he's still unpacking as we go, and he just keeps getting better. He's trending up.
Yeah. No, exactly. And final award, and again, I had completely forgotten about the fact that 2020 marks the end of a decade. So the player of the decade, of course, captain Anze Kopitar. We had a conversation about this the other day, again, peeking behind the scenes, and I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't concentrating, and I just said, player of the decade. That's interesting. And our producer asked us, well, who would have you picked? And I said, yeah, Anze Kopitar, of course. I mean, the leading scorer, the captain. He was an alternate captain when they won the cup twice, but two-time cup winner, Olympian, all-star. I mean, he has become one of the most important Kings in Kings history.
You said it all right there, Jesse. There's nothing to follow up with after that. He's the player of the decade.